before you do that on a property, you want to do your due diligence and make sure that the property doesn't have any red flags. You're not investing into the house. The house depreciates, the land appreciates. Okay, we've got an easement here. So based on those sales, I believe, beginning at 900,000 is a good mark. The next step is putting in that offer, getting the contract reviewed, and then negotiating from there. Welcome back, guys. So the last week's episode, we were at the Ferntree Gully house and it looks very good. Honestly, it has a good feel about it. I love the block size. So naturally, I'm tempted to put in an offer and begin negotiations. But before you do that on a property, you want to do your due diligence and make sure that the property doesn't have any red flags. So I'm going to show you now how I do my due diligence for my own properties and of course for our clients. So what I'll begin by doing is checking the land. Because really, when you buy an investment property, you're investing into the land. You're not investing into the house. The house depreciates, the land appreciates. So we want to make sure that there aren't any overlays or any encumbrances to the property. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm putting the address into a satellite software. This is ArchiStar, and it shows me if there are any overlays. So I'll check the flooding, no bushfire risk, no heritage overlay, no conservation overlay. So everything is looking good so far. Now I'll turn on the easement map. Okay, we've got an easement here. So this easement is most likely sewerage or drainage. And as you can see, it's on every property in that street. So it's very normal. Now it is within, it runs along the back fence. So you could say it's within the site's setback. And you can see the neighbour is developing a secondary dwelling. They're building units. And you can see where they just stop building right at that easement line. So that shows you how you can have an easement, but you're not allowed to build on top. And that's because if the council ever has to go in and access that, drainage line, sewage, whatever it is, if they have to access it, you can't be having any structures or building on that line. So yes, we've got an easement here. It's not the end of the world. Okay, most properties, especially in Melbourne, have easements, so it's just good to know. Next, what I'm going to do is I want to check that all of that information is correct. So I'm putting the address into VicPlan. This is a separate website. And what you'll see here is a tab, Create Planning Property Report. All right, now this is going to reiterate that there are hopefully no overlays. So this first page, we can see the zoning map. This one's zoned neighbourhood residential, and we know that the neighbour has developed 2 units, so that's all good. We can see that the neighbour at the rear has a vegetation protection overlay. Now, I remember when I inspected it, there were those 2 big trees that may be gum trees or some sort of native tree on that property. Ours doesn't have it, so no vegetation overlay, which is good. That overlay will just make development more expensive if you have to get an arborist to go out to assess your tree. Now, it's not in the bushfire, no bushfire overlay, which is great, and no sign of the flood overlay, which is awesome. So that tells us that the land here is good. We don't have any overlays. Yes, we have an easement. It doesn't hinder development. Everything is fine. Now I do want to check the slope of the land. So I'm turning on the contours here, and you can see that there is at least a 1 meter fall from 94 meters above sea level down to 93. And so essentially that's telling you there is a slope. 1 meter is not the end of the world. It's a little bit more than 1 meter, and that's something I did notice when inspecting, but it's okay. It simply means, if it rains, there's more pooling at one side of the property, but it's not a major issue. It's just good to know. You don't want to buy a property on a huge steep hill. Even if you can develop, it just makes your development more expensive. So that's why the contours matter. Now, what I want to check next is the investment metrics for the suburb of Ferntree Gully. So I'm going to open up DSR data and type in Ferntree Gully. So what I can see here, a few things that are really important. Number one, the typical value of houses, and not 2-bedroom houses, but 3 or 4 bedroom houses, is $1 million for Ferntree Gully. So pretty expensive. And that's $100,000 more than the median, the recorded median over the past 12 months. So that tells us that there is growth in this market and the value of properties is actually higher than what you'll read as the median. So that's a good rule of thumb that there is momentum in this market. The second thing I like to look at is the amount of renters. So you have 21.8% of renters, the rest being owner occupiers. This is quite low. We like to see that number at 30% or less. So 21% is tight, and essentially that means you've got a very much owner-occupier dominated market, which means, you know, your neighbors are out on the weekend maintaining their gardens, mowing the lawn, whereas a renter is less likely to do those things. And essentially that means your neighborhood is being maintained better than if it were just filled with renters. Now, houses are selling in 24 days. This is very quick. Not only that, but we can see that that number is trending downwards quite significantly over the past 1, 2, 3 months. That's a great sign. But ever since 2023, really, that number has come down. But it's always sort of hovering around that 30-day mark, which is still good. Now, we have a really high online search interest. The national average is 50, and Ferntree Gully has an online search interest of 86. This tells us that the suburb is becoming quite popular. People are putting it into realestate.com. Investors, first home buyers, etc. That simply indicates more demand for the area, which is great. That's what we want. We want more demand, we want less supply, and that's what equals capital growth. Okay, vacancy rates are just under 1%. That's not super impressive for Melbourne, but it's good. This means the house is renting out in 2 to 3 weeks' time, and yeah, you're not having an issue. It's not sitting vacant on the market, whereas if you buy out in, for example, Pakenham or Clyde, they do have higher vacancy rates. So all of this looks really good. There is no red flag. The rental yields are pretty low, but that's expected, 3.5%. The stock on market actually is really good, 0.64%. The national average is 1.24. So half the amount of supply than the average suburb. This tells us we've got really tight stock available. So not many houses for sale, but more and more people looking up Ferntree Gully and buying in this area. So all of this is actually really good. This is all pointing towards capital growth. So those are the metrics you want to look at. Now, the next thing you'll want to do if you're looking to put in an offer on a property is check out the most recent sales that are similar to your property. So in this scenario, we're looking at a 2-bedroom house on a 720 square meter block of land. I'm going to look at properties in both Ferntree Gully and Knoxfield because it's on the border of those two suburbs, and sort of assess what these properties are actually selling for. So I have 3 really good similar sales. Alrighty, number 3 is 46 Elton Road in Ferntree Gully. Now this one is, I would say, an inferior location. It's more in the heart of Ferntree Gully, whereas I'm on the border of Knoxfield, which is a superior suburb. Now this one sold for $855, and what you can see is that this property needs significant renovation. The timber on the outside is very much worn down, that needs a repaint. Timber itself is inferior to brick. Buyers always prefer brick. And the interior is not as nice. Like, those floorboards need to be polished. It could do with a paint. The bathroom looks like it needs renovation. So overall, it's an inferior property, which means the one I'm looking at should definitely be worth more than $855. If anything, it should be worth closer to $900,000 because that house needs $50K plus worth of work. Now, number 2, we have 97 Burke Road in Ferntree Gully, a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, which has sold for $930,000. Now this one, it's marked on realestate.com as a 3-bedroom house, which would make it superior. However, that 3rd bedroom, it's actually an extension. And if I were living there, I would be using that as a study. So it is an extra space, but it's really not a 3rd bedroom. It really is a 2-bedroom house. The exterior is not timber, I don't believe. I believe it's actually harder plank. So this is not as annoying as timber to maintain, but it's still not as good as brick. So it's inferior for that reason. And that facade just isn't that pretty, if I'm honest. Kitchen has been updated, which is good. Bathroom, the shower area has been updated, but it's timber on the ceiling is a bit random. It could do with a paint, this house. It does have a really nice shed at the back, and the land size is very similar. So I would say this one is what they call comparable. It's very similar. If anything, I could definitely peg the property to this one and say, yep, it's definitely worth closer to 930. Maybe not 930 itself. I mean, this property is a huge shed, but definitely close to that mark. Now we've got a 3rd similar sale, 162 O'Connor Road in Knoxfield. This one, again, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. Brick, it definitely looks nicer from, the facade point of view. Let's take a deeper look. The whole interior, honestly, it's a little newer. It doesn't feel as clean, neat and tidy, but the interior is good, probably almost superior. However, the block shape it's an irregular shaped block. So it's not that perfect rectangular shape that investors or developers like. This one is irregular, but it has a really good street frontage. So although I wouldn't be retaining the dwelling and building a second at the back, I'd be demolishing it and maybe developing duplexes. So I would say this property is pretty much, I would say it is superior for the fact that it's in a better location and land size very similar, facade nicer, but again, quite similar enough that I could peg this one and say, yep, I'm comfortable paying $920, for example. So that's a bit of a crash course on how I do the due diligence on properties I'm looking to buy for myself or for a client. I'm looking at the usability of the land, make sure that there are no restrictions to it. I'm looking at the quality of the suburb, so whether it looks primed for capital growth, which Ferntree Gully does. And then thirdly, I'm looking at the most similar recently sold properties, because that will guide me on the offer that I should be putting forward. So based on those sales, I believe, beginning at 900,000 is a good mark, and I would not be going any higher than 930, that's for sure. The next step is putting in that offer, getting the contract reviewed, and then negotiating from there. So that'll be the next episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. I'm documenting this series of buying my next investment property. If it's not this property, there will be another one, so make sure you subscribe to stay tuned on what I buy. Thanks.